This guy writes, why do people say dating as a man gets easier after 30? In my opinion, it hasn't. Few reasons. Well, one, because sometimes women are attracted to guys that are like mission driven, or sometimes are successful, or sometimes have their life together, just have maybe that higher status. And so if they basically are successful men, usually men in their 30s are usually more successful than men in their 20s. Another reason is that with women in like their late 20s, early 30s, is like usually you see women want to settle down, get married, get kids, get a house together, just kind of have a more stable family life. And so sometimes what you'll see is that a lot of women will settle and basically go for the nice guy that has like a steady job, and he maybe has a house already, and he has a nice car, and he's got kind of like a square life. But it's just like oftentimes you'll see a lot of women shift over to that. And so I'm not basically suggesting this to settle. I'm really suggesting that you really need to work on yourself and your relationship skills, because it's like, even if you settle and get into a marriage, it's like sometimes people get into the marriage because they think that's going to make them happy. But what is it, like close to 65% of marriages end in divorce? So, I mean, that's pretty much evidence right there that that a lot of people aren't happy in their marriages. So don't think of that as like a solution, just getting in a relationship with somebody and thinking that's going to solve your problems. It's like there's no way around just putting the work in to understand how to communicate, how to really raise the other person's attraction, how to maintain that attraction, how to get it in the first place, how to manage the space between the two of you, how to align your polarities, masculine and feminine energies, how to deal with problems, how to pass her tests, how to recognize the reasons behind why she's testing, and how to basically make her feel in those ways, basically bypassing the material things or whatever she's saying to you, bypassing that and making her feel exactly what she's wanting. And then it really just basically settles the whole thing. It's a much better way of communicating. All that stuff's in those products right there if you check it out in the description below. But those are some reasons why, in guys in their 30s sometimes can have more success, because sometimes they are more successful and sometimes women are trying to basically settle down. But this guy, he says, in my opinion, it hasn't. Maybe he isn't very successful as far as his career, or maybe he doesn't know how to approach women, or maybe he's taking like a nice guy approach. And what you'll see sometimes is even like old people, like they never learn these things, never learn these skills. So they're just trying to run the same patterns that don't work over and over again, just fail over and over again. And sometimes that can even be sad to see, so it's like, cause they're like, oftentimes their biggest fear is like being alone, and then they just don't know how to get out of that pattern. And all these skills are things that you can get out yourself just by learning. In the post, guy writes, so he's 32. He says, I have had a couple, like 2 or 3 short-term relationships who have lasted like half a year. First 2 broke off, but the first 2 I broke off, but the second she broke up with me because of insecurities that she wanted to work with alone. Bullshit on that one, buddy. She just wasn't attracted to you. You weren't showing up. And so that was her way of not hurting your feelings, and you bought it. And now you're saying that is truth. But really, it's like she just wasn't attracted to you. Women will say that. You have to be aware of that, because they don't often want to hurt your feelings. Other than that, though, I haven't really had much luck in dating. My ex broke up with me 4 years ago, and since then I've only managed to get one one-night stand and one other who kissed me. And so you're basically running some pattern that's not building her attraction. Maybe it's freaking her out. Maybe not even getting you to the dating phase. So it's like pickup phase, make it simple. If you see somebody in person, just talk to them about anything. Doesn't matter. Her clothes, the environment, something. Maybe you're in line for something. Maybe you see something kind of funny and you mention it to her. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you just talk to her. And then if she gives you those signals, she's probably going to give you an eye test. So she's going to look in your eyes, and then you have to basically look back in her eyes and don't look away. Be aware of that one. That's probably the most common test that you see from her to kind of test her strength, test her confidence. Once you pass that and recognize that she's like interested in you, is she playing with her hair, asking you questions, enthusiastic in her responses, is she getting in your proximity? Is she even initiating contact? Things along that regard. If you can feel that she's attracted to you, that's the opportunity you have to set a date or get her number. And you want to, when you ask her that, you want to assume that she will say yes. Hey, I'd love to get to dinner with you. What days you're free? And or like, yeah, hey, I'd love to get to dinner with you. What's your number? Make it simple, and then don't overcomplicate it in the meantime. It's like once you get a date, once you're direct, decisive, which is a masculine quality, which will raise her attraction in you. Once you're direct, decisive, get the outcome of getting her to agree to go on a date with you and locking that in, saying, hey, if you get there first, get us a table. If I get one, I'll get us a table. Otherwise, I'll see you there. Does that work for you? She says yes. And then you don't message her at all after that. It's like you've got the outcome. What you'll notice is like if you start trying to text her every day thinking that's going to build connection, you have to do that because that's what relationships do. It has no basically logical or really, it can be logical a lot in a lot of guys' minds, but it's more like it doesn't get the results and it's not really an effective way. It's like you already have the outcome. Why oversell them on these things? And oftentimes what you'll find is in that process, you say something that's kind of interpreted as being like weird or trying to be funny over text and it's not conveyed because all you're communicating is like texting. All you get is the words. You don't get the body language, the tone of voice, the context of the situation. And so it's almost like a danger zone if you're trying to text her all the time, especially at those beginning stages. You can be conveyed as being chasing her, conveyed as insecure, and oftentimes women they use the phone to weed out guys. And so they'll test you over the phone. If you don't basically pick those up and fail her tests, she's done, dude. So eliminate all that unnecessary thing, get to the outcome as few steps as possible, just have fun on the date. So now where you're at, you're in the dating stage. It's like you hooked up with one woman. Maybe your approach is trying to basically like rush into sex. It's like you don't want to do that either. Sometimes it can work, but in your case, one time over 4 years. So what you want to do is basically just build that connection, build that openness as far as getting her to open up, be comfortable with you, have a good time. Once you have a good time with her, maybe you go to multiple locations, then you kiss her, and then basically your emotions kind of grow together. You have that more intense feeling, and that's really the best opportunity to ask her back to your place or someplace private. When you do that, that's really your best shot. Just know that when you're trying to set up sex, if that's your outcome, that it's like with women, it's more of a whole process throughout the whole entire date that leads up to a moment of sex. Whereas oftentimes, like naturally, guys can just be like turned on very quickly, and so they just kind of outcome driven, go for sex. But it's like you have to behave in a way that basically just builds up and have a fun time with the other person, and builds up that whole experience. That's what it is, a whole experience that leads to a final moment. So follow those. That will give you the best chance. Eliminate a lot of the unnecessary like texting, hey, what are you doing? Kind of validation seeking actions. A lot of that's really just based on fear that she'll leave you or you won't basically keep her as far as dating. It's just comes from a fearful place. Whenever you take action out of that, often leads to negative results. When I've asked for feedback here on Reddit, people say that it doesn't sound like I've done anything wrong. Well, you never got any results, so obviously you're doing something wrong. That I sound really great. It's like, well, are you getting your advice? Who are you getting your advice from too, dude? So it's like, look at the reality of the situation, and you wouldn't be writing this post if you thought you were doing great. My best friend, who's 32, also says, I definitely have the qualities of a proper long-term relationship. And then I'm one of the greatest guys she's ever known. And so his best friend is a woman. And when you ever try to get advice from women, oftentimes, well, one, they don't necessarily know how they're attracted to men. And so they'll give you advice that's just wrong. And so that's something you'll realize. I did that myself. I was like, well, if I just ask these girls that I know from college, like that was like beginning stages when I really started learning about this stuff. And they gave me all these like mixed signals, mixed responses. No, that's not true. This is true. It was just like total jumble. But what I realized is they didn't know. So just be careful on that. Don't think that women, just because they're women, know how attraction works. And that I'm one of the greatest guys she's ever known, and that it's too bad that we don't feel attraction towards each other, because we would have been a great couple. She's like, you're such a great guy. Oh God. And she's pulled something like this on you. And then you're thinking like, oh, I'm such a great guy, so I'll just keep doing that. And then I'll find somebody. What she's saying is like, I'm not attracted to you. How you act is attractive, but you're really nice. It's what she's communicating is she's not attracted to you. So you're probably a nice guy. You're probably acting in ways that are trying to like really please her, to benefit her. But oftentimes what you're probably conveying to the other person is that you're not really strong as a leader. You're probably acting in a lot of ways that communicate insecurities, fears. And when you do this, her attraction is going to drop. Super common pattern in today's society, just being like that nice guy role. But it's also super common that relationships fail. And one of the biggest things is this pattern. It's like his attraction isn't a choice. And so if you behave in ways and patterns that build her attraction, it's like that won't be a choice as well. It's like she'll be attracted to you. If you behave in the ways you're doing now, she's going to not be attracted to you like clockwork. He says, about me, 32 years old, lives in my old rental apartment, have a stable job with an average pay, about $3,000 a month. I live in my country, Sweden, second largest city. I have an extremely easy time getting first dates through Tinder, but like I said, I have a big problem getting it past my first date. So yeah, when you're showing up on the date, you're probably being an open book, telling her your whole life story. You're not taking the lead as far as probably planning the date. You're not being direct, decisive. You're not giving her that vibe of just kind of like a more masculine man. Maybe you're talking about heavy topics, maybe talking about exes, maybe you're talking about how it never works out for you. Just avoid all that stuff and just ask her questions that she wants to answer, that are fun to answer, because when you make her feel a certain way, she's going to associate that with you. And you might be trying to like lock her down to a next date, which communicates insecurity, saying like, oh, did I do good kind of attitude. Whenever you have that kind of pleaser, seeking that approval, did I do good attitude, it's going to turn her off. He says, I also have light Aspergers syndrome, which doesn't really affect me much platonically or professionally, but definitely romantically. I'm not scared of girls or shy, but I'm terrible in reading social romantic cues, and I feel like I am stuck in a loop of touching too much and touching too little on dates. Yeah, so as well, whether you got Asperger's or not, just read that how often, how frequently does she initiate contact versus how frequently do you initiate contact. If you're doing it way more than her, it's probably going to convey that you're trying to you need that validation of always touching her to basically assure yourself that the two of you are good in a situation. She doesn't want that. She wants you to know and be confident that you are good and know where you stand in the relationship. And so just be aware of that and let her do more of the initiating as far as physical contact than you. Sometimes you might, like at the very beginning stages, you might have to be the one who basically breaks that contact. You have to make the move as far as going for the kiss or setting up an opportunity for sex to happen. But she's still going to probably give you the signals on when it's okay to kind of initiate that contact. So she's going to kind of bump into you. Maybe she like brushes your hand. Maybe she like teasingly like bumps into you. But all those signs, when she does things like that, those are basically invitations to, and it will basically communicating that it's okay for you to make a move now. So just be aware of that. What I mean by that is that I try to break the touch barrier on one day, even by something as light as touching her upper back or upper arm. Well, what you should do is like when she does something like that, that's kind of like what she would kind of do, like kind of bump into you, brush into you, do something light like that. And then it's your really responsibility to be confident enough to go for something like holding her hand, or confident enough for going for that kiss. And so instead of just this kind of like testing kind of thing, unsure, because that's really what it communicates, is you're not really sure about yourself. And so you're just kind of doing like these like maybe kind of brushing or seeing like what you can do or whatever. Just not going for really the outcome that you want. And when you communicate that you aren't sure of yourself, it's less confident and it will drop her attraction. Then I proceed to not touch at all the next date with the next girl. Overthinking it a little bit, man. It's really just how you're feeling in a moment. So put yourself in that present moment through really, well, some of the best ways to do that is through active listening. So like really listening to her, listening to what she has to say, listening what she's like feeling, like see what she's feeling, why she's saying those things and how it relates to other things. Looking at her body language, reading her body language, reading her tone of voice, and just really just being present with her in that moment. And when you're present, you just like naturally can see those signals that she's telling you to make a move or that she's attracted to you in that moment. And then she says, I just felt like a friend. Yeah. Because you're not being decisive, not making a move, just kind of like in this unsure place. And that there was no spark and such. People have told me that I have the perfect qualities for post 30 dating because I'm such a stable, considerate, and good guy. You're a nice guy, dude. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that pattern's not going to translate over to a high success rate as far as relationships. How do you do that? Adopt a masculine quality. How do you basically overcome that? You adopt a masculine quality, be mission driven. Your decisions are based on your mission. Your mission is number one in your life. And when you're with her, she is number one in that moment. So just understand that. And then also be able to walk away from people and mean it. Because what that does is it basically gives you that natural strength. That's really the mindset that goes behind basically. You see people coming up with like really great comebacks or like strong responses. That's really the mindset behind it. Is I can walk away from this situation and mean it. I can walk away from you and mean it. And once you really adopt that, you'll notice that there's different degrees of that, and how you really use it. But it is really, those two things are really the biggest things in being more masculine, being more strong. In comparison, the nice guy approach is he can't walk away, and he basically since he can't walk away, he'll just settle for scrap, settle for anything, and he'll act in ways that are needy, insecure, aren't strong, doesn't stick up for himself. And then when he doesn't have a mission, isn't mission driven, he's focused on the relationship. And when that happens, she picks up on that he's not mission driven. And then again, it's like he's basically taking way too much action, smothering her, and just needing that validation of really being loved or whatever. But it's like, both those things, if you don't have them, it's really going to cause a lot of problems in the relationship. And that's generally what people look for when building a family. See, that relates back to what I was saying at the very beginning, that women in like their late 20s, early 30s are looking for some like family life, and sometimes they'll settle for like a guy who has like a stable job, maybe a house, maybe a car, and kind of has his life together somewhat. But again, if they get into those relationships, they'll still experience the same pains that that happened all the time before, but now they just have a label in that they're married to somebody, and that's really the only thing that changed. And that's why the divorce rate's so high. Just because people don't really know how to behave in relationships, know how to basically succeed. They haven't done any work on themselves to learn this stuff, and they are learnable skills. And not just short-term dating in their 20s, but I don't see it. What do people mean when they say this? Because in my opinion, dating is just, all caps, as difficult after 30 as it was before 30. Well, you're probably still running the same behavior, same patterns. And if you keep running these patterns, it's going to be hard when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 60, 70, 80. It says, hell, I'd even say it's more difficult, as I at least had a couple of relationships in my 20s, even if they didn't last. Sucks, dude, but there's no way around. If you want to have success and maintain success in relationships, you got to learn about how relationships work. So whether you do it with me, whether you check out those products in the description, whether you find it some other place, whether you read as many books as you can, you got to take some kind of action. You got to take that first step and really progressing and getting yourself better at these skills and making progress towards something every day. When that happens, your confidence will grow. And when your confidence grows, your success grows, really.